What is going on, Stallions? Welcome to the Gamer Heaven, where we focus on the past, present, and future of gaming. For many of you gaming stallions out there, including myself, I had never played Spider-Man, which is, I know, a cardinal sin. However, I'm kind of glad I didn't, because I got my hands on the PS5 remastered version and played it start to finish with HDR, ray tracing, and a capped 60 frames per second, not to mention all the haptic feedback and adaptive triggers you can handle. I have a lot to say about this game. There will be timestamps in the description below in case you guys get lost. Just use that like a roadmap. Without further ado, like Peter Parker, let's hop into this thing. So I know this game is gorgeous and you want to start shooting web bukakis at Mary Jane's chin. However, you need to get your settings dialed in, boys. So the first thing is you want to come down here and add option to skip puzzles on. You will have the option to skip puzzles if the game sees you're struggling, but there's so many puzzles in this game and they're super repetitive, and a lot of times they're really complicated. You might just want to jump back into the action. So turn that on. Adaptive triggers, leave this on because when you're web slinging, you get resistance from the buildings. Vibration intensity, that's on you. It doesn't have the same haptic feedback as Miles Morales, which was developed specifically for the PS5. However, the vibration does a pretty good job of handling things like when his cell phone rings or he gets a tickle in the nether regions. Next thing, we want to set up our audio. So whatever you primarily use, headphones, a sound bar, surround sound setup, you want to make sure that you're adapted for that. I did leave it in home theater mode even when I was using headsets, and it sounded pretty good. You want to turn the JJ podcast off. You can still listen to them manually, but they will automatically play, and it is so annoying. You want to throat chop this guy because basically his voice is like needles in your urethra tip. Now, graphical settings. When you first start the game, you will be given these options. HDR on, even if you don't have an HDR TV, but especially if you do. Now, graphics mode. This is the most important setting in this game. Fidelity is 30 frames per second, but has the highest level of ray tracing and graphical beauty. Performance is 60 frames per second. However, you do not have ray tracing, but Performance RT strikes a beautiful balance between the both, where you have awesome shading and textures, but you also get a capped 60 frames per second, which is very fluid when you're swinging around. Now, motion blur and film grain, as well as chromatic aberration, turn them off. You guys can thank me later. The next one is just personal preference, but the high visibility spider sense, as you can see, it's more of a neon lime green color, which is a lot easier to see when there's a lot of motion on screen or you're involved in a fight and it's hard for you to focus on the action. Get ready to come from the corneas, boys, because the graphics are damn fine, especially for the fact that this is a PS4 remastered title that utilizes some features that are available in the PS5. For example, the higher frame rate, the HDR, the ray tracing, better textures, shaders, and a little bit of the Tempest audio engine, which we'll cover during the audio design section of this game. But I will say, for not being a natively developed PS5 title, they did a phenomenal job of utilizing ray tracing. Keep in mind, I was running it in Performance RT. I did test it in the Fidelity mode, which does crank up the ray tracing even further. However, RT is where it's at. You're getting the same ray tracing effects. I'm going to show you guys some screenshots here in a minute. I just want to make sure that you guys don't instantly cremate in your pants because it is pretty darn good. The ray tracing is handled extremely well, and the HDR kind of accentuates that to where lighting is a major factor in this game, as there are a lot of low light and night stealth scenes, as well as some scenes where you're swinging through the city during midday and you get the sun kind of bleeding through the buildings. And if you're not ready to pop an erection, too late. Peter Parker was over here pickling his pepper inside the jack-off closet, and I took a little screenshot. The lighting looks phenomenal in this game. The way that light bounces off of textures in a realistic way. I mean, if you experience ray tracing on PC, this is very similar to that. Look at his face. Just would you look at it? Would you just look at it? Overall, it looks amazing. Beautiful game. And if a PS4 remastered launch title can look this good, I have high hopes for ray tracing, HDR, and high frame rates in the future with natively developed PS5 titles. So as for the soundtrack as well as the audio design, both very good. The soundtrack is nothing short of a masterful score, and it never felt overpowering or out of place whenever there was a sentimental, tender moment in the story. Gentle violas would come in there plucking, shucking, and jiving to really get me secreting the emotional juices, and whenever combat would fire up, which is pretty frequent in this game, there's a nice soundtrack to back it up to get you hyped and get your nipples hard for the fight. So music aside, the actual audio design is pretty damn good. I used the Pulse 3D headset for about a third of the game, then my soundbar for the majority of the game, and for a short amount of time I used my 5.1 surround sound, and I have to say there's a lot of ambient sounds you pick up off in the distance in New York. People shooting up, people hawking loogies into each other's mouths in back alleys, prostitutes doing the Lord's work in the back of cars, the springs squeaking and whatnot. There's a lot of ambient sounds. You really feel like you're in New York and you need a tetanus shot. Alright, web slinging, boys. Swinging through New York has got to be one of the most satisfying parts of this game. In fact, I forgoed the fast travel option 90% of the game just so I could try out different freestyle tricks and whatnot, and oh my god. Not only does it look beautiful, as you see the draw distance is practically infinite. I've never once noticed any texture pop in the distance or anything like that. Now granted, the screen recording is in 1080p, and the gameplay that I'm actually seeing natively was in 4K 60, ray tracing HDR, but god damn, this shit was sick, as the kids say. It was a dank banger. So with the adaptive triggers on, you're getting a little bit of resistance each time you latch onto a building, which gives you feedback, not to mention you get haptic vibration, which feels really, really good. And if your girlfriend or wife's in the room, go ahead and kick her out now. I don't want her to leave you when she sees this freestyle footage right here. I get a nasty little dank web swinging combo here. I truly am amazing like Spider-Man. Little slow slide, into a reverse cowgirl, into a Husker Du, how do you do? Into a barrel roll dolphin tuna flip. Transitioning smoothly into a frolic flip or fuck, and then finishing off with a nice Turkish snow cone for dessert. Always goes down smooth. Now the combat system is easy to use, but it's also in-depth enough to where it's hard to master. You do have a skill tree or skill set, which you can build up through suit powers, as well as personal abilities and moves to kind of fit your playstyle. It's a good balance of timing and parries, as well as just straight up ass-beating, web-slinging, and bukkaking people, and it is truly an enjoyable time. Granted, the game is rather long. You're looking at about 12 to 16 hours with just the primary campaign, no side quests, so there is going to be a lot of fighting in there, but it doesn't really feel repetitive because there's a lot of different gangs. For example, the demons that I'm fighting right now, and each gang or organization has multiple types of enemies that have different abilities and can only be affected by certain attacks. Not to mention, by the end of the game, when you get more comfortable with his abilities, you're going to be using Peter Parker's more advanced abilities, like launching people up into the air, slamming them back down to the ground, as well as using finishers, and most importantly, using your equipment. By the end of the game, I was using my equipment a lot more, so drones, electrical webs, traps, stuff like that. And there's also a lot of stealth kills where you can drop down from the ceiling, and before they even know what's going on, they're playing with themselves. They got one hand on the cell phone, the other on the junk. They're getting smashed around. So overall, the combat system is very, very enjoyable, and I can't really think of any critiques or complaints that I had. So the story, oh my god. So it's no Uncharted or anything like that, but the story is incredibly solid. You have characters that are so believable and likable. Even the protagonists, the villains in this game, some of them are just mindless, kill everything, fuck the world in its ass villains, but a lot of them, the primary villain, I'm not going to spoil anything in case you haven't played it, but damn, he's totally relatable, and he's actually a very likable character. And there's a lot of tension between Mary Jane and Peter. Peter's thinking, I used to be inside of you. Why am I not anymore? What's going on? She's thinking, you used to be inside me. Why are you not right now? What the hell's going on? Look, Stan Lee, a cameo from Stan Lee. That's the maker of Spider-Man, that old man right there. Young kids probably didn't know that. That's the guy that made the comic books. And as you guys noticed when they were sitting down there in the diner talking, they did replace the face from the old school Spider-Man to the new boyish charm, boyish wonder Spider-Man that's a little bit more, what's the word? Kind of naive, not clumsy or ditzy or anything like that, but he's a little bit more naive to his powers. He's a little bit more witty and clever with his jokes when he's ripping on people. He might snap somebody's ankle and then be like, hey, have a nice trip. See you next fall, you big dumb bitch. But overall, the story holds itself through the first and second act, and the third act is pretty phenomenal when everything gets tied together, and you get to see exactly how Peter Parker is going to grab the situation by the hips and take it to Pound Town, and he does. So as for in-game, what is there to do after you beat the main story or campaign? Well, actually quite a lot. There's crimes out in the city that you can do. There's also Peter's backpacks that you can collect. You can unlock a bunch of additional suits, which, by the way, as you can see from the suit that I'm wearing, there's some really sick-ass ones. There's also a ton of collectibles like comics and stuff like that, and a lot of activities to do out in town that can keep you busy for probably an additional, I would say, at least 20 to 30 hours after the primary campaign. And the fact that this game is already attached to Miles Morales, it comes with a downloadable copy of this game. For people like myself that have never played the original Spider-Man, this game here, it's worth playing this one before Miles Morales. That was my exact strategy, was to play this first, as you do get introduced to Miles Morales, as well as the dynamic of Spider-Man, MJ, all the supporting characters, all of his allies, and all of his enemies, and that way you can transition into Miles Morales, where you're able to build on that even further and get the full effect of the PlayStation 5 in a Spider-Man game. So for somebody that's never played it before, and even people that did play it on the original PS4, especially if you didn't have a Pro, this is a huge upgrade, and it's definitely worth your time. Obviously, your time is precious, it's sweet, it's tender, you don't want to waste it, and this game certainly will not do that for you, and I 10 out of 10 do recommend playing this game in preparation for Miles Morales. So what is my final verdict on this game? I think it's incredibly enjoyable. It was a good game on the PS4 from what I've heard, and now that I've actually played the story with a different face, obviously, with this guy, and I don't just mean the face of the graphics, I also mean literally Spider-Man, it's a new character, but even the mandatory stealth missions, which I usually hate in games, like right now you see me as Mary Jane right now moving her tuchus gently through the map right here. Even those missions where you're playing either Miles Morales, who yes, you do play as in this game, as well as MJ, they felt pretty good. You're able to distract guards. You're able to hack as Miles Morales to distract people with electronics. Think of it like Watch Dogs kind of. Those were actually pretty enjoyable, although there is quite a few of those missions. And then one thing I really didn't like about the game, I think actually like it's the only complaint I have about the game, period, is the fact that there is mandatory side missions where you have to go out there and make your quota of going out there and doing like stopping random crimes in the city or whatever. It's like in between missions. Peter will be like, well, I've got to go out there and make sure the town still knows I'm here for him. And you got to run around and do some stupid side missions where you break up a fight or stop a DUI driver from, you know, barricading into a bunch of pedestrians. And like, that's cool, but you can do that on your own leisure, on your own time after you beat the story. But this makes you spend, you know, little chunks of time taking you out of the immersion of the story because you have to do these mandatory side quests. Other than that, everything about this game is absolutely awesome. The audio design, the soundtrack, the graphics, the controls, the combat, the web slinging. This is a fantastic game. So because of those mandatory side missions, I am going to give this a 9.5 out of 10 bananas on the Stiffy meter. It is truly worth a play, especially because, like I said, this digital download of the game comes with Miles Morales. It's in the front cover of the physical version of the disc, which is pretty cool. Definitely worth a pickup. That's going to do it, guys. If you enjoyed this video, a like definitely helps it to get seen by more people, which in turn helps me grow my little channel, which I do greatly, greatly appreciate. Subscribe for more content like this. I do a lot of news in the gaming community and industry, as well as tutorials helping you get set up streaming and YouTubing, as well as game reviews like this one right here. Now, if you'll excuse me, boys, I have MJ in the other room, and she is awaiting me patiently, so I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.